Well, namaskar and welcome. Thank you for tuning in to the Economic Brief. Now, over the next half hour, we're going to take you through important economy-related stories from India and the world, and we'll get you expert opinion on the impact of those stories on their related spheres of influence. On the show, the Indian economy ends 2024 with a strong performance in both manufacturing and services and backed by significant demand. Pakistan's central bank has eased around 9% in its monetary policy this year. Has it helped kickstart a revival? Syria's Assad regime illicitly profited from the sale of a stimulant commonly known as Captagon. And the DRC has taken Apple to court over components allegedly obtained through conflict mining. Before we move on, let's listen to India's Commerce and Industry Minister motivating Indian businesses that are involved with the leather and footwear industry to play their crucial part in taking India to a Viksit Bharat, or a developed India, by 2047.
Now that we have all agreed to embark on the journey of Viksit Bharat, your sector will play an important role, not only to ensure that every child in the country, every resident of India, every citizen of India has quality footwear, but the footwear made in India will go across oceans, across the world.
Well, now, India's economy has ended 2024 with a strong performance, and we've seen that through the year. But if we look at these figures now coming up behind me, we can see that the PMI, that's the Purchasing Managers Index, is at 60.7, and that is a significant high. 60.7 against 58.6 in November. Now, what is the Purchasing Managers Index? In fact, it is a diffusion index, and it's not a percentage, even though it works from 0 to 100. And what is above 50 shows expansion, and below 50 shows contraction. So 60.7 is a significant height in growth. Now, apart from that, we can see that there's record job creation in services and manufacturing, and low inflation, which is spurring demand. If we go back, in fact, it's also showing that hiring is taking place at its fastest pace since late 2005. All this seems to suggest that we are likely to see a rate cut. But before we go there, let's go back to the first slide here. We can see that consumer inflation has eased from 5.48%, and that was it's eased to 5.48%, in fact, from 6.21%. And that is, we're seeing that the output is at its fastest pace in 4 months. Output obviously requires you to have demand that is going to pull that in. It's got to be financed through demand, which includes also demand from international trade. And the biggest sign of harmonious growth, as we can see, is job creation, which is because we need to have jobs that are created even in the gig economy. As a result of that we can keep the momentum going for growth. And we can see that low inflation is spurring demand. As a result of that, all this seems to be working together in a cycle, in a virtuous cycle for growth. So, in a nutshell, that's what the Indian economy has ended with in the year 2024. Let's listen to what the US Federal Reserve's chair, Jerome Powell, has said. He's going to be demitting office after Donald Trump takes office, but he can't continue till the end of his term, is what the Trump administration says. But, he's indicated that he's been a bit hawkish, and he's indicated that they're going to slow down on the easing in 2025. But he's quite, bullish about the U.S. economy currently. Let's listen to what he said.
The outlook is pretty bright for our economy. We have to stay on task, though, and continue to have restrictive policies so that we can get inflation down to 2%. The U.S. is not feeling really the effects of geopolitical turmoil, but we are certainly at a time of elevated geopolitical turmoil, and it remains a risk.
And we are joined by Dr. N.R. Bhanumurthy, who is the director of the Madras School of Economics. He's joining us from Chennai. Dr. Bhanumurthy, how much of this momentum that we are seeing in the Indian economy is likely to continue into 2025, also in terms of, increasing exports?
Yeah, I think except for that last 2 quarters, the momentum in the Indian economy has been continuing for the past 2 years. And going forward, we do expect that this continue to outperform many of the emerging market economies, but purely for a couple of reasons. The kind of fiscal policy the government of India has been following for the past 3 years, which is actually creating a growth impetus in the economy and also a demand creation. As you all know, that government has been increasing capital expenditure for the past 3 years, and historically very high, rates of capital investment that's been done by the public sector. So that is a major change that India has followed. And going forward, I'm expecting in the current budgets or the budget that is going to come up next month, that we are going to see some kind of continuity in terms of the fiscal policy. But I think in addition to the fiscal policy, the monetary policy also played a very supporting role. That is something I keep saying, that India has become a very bright spot in a troubled global economy for one simple reason, that we had a much better coordination between the fiscal and monetary authority. And I'm expecting the same kind of coordination under the new governor at the RBI. So in my view, I think we are going to see much better growth in the rest of the 2 quarters. And as you rightly pointed out, Mark, in fact, the two number that for the 2 months, last 2 months, October and November, we have seen a very high exports growth.
Okay.
And I think even in the month of November, we have seen high imports also. That actually
That's right.
suggests
Yes.
there is that going forward, there is a demand that is going to be created. And I think that is what the importers are actually responding to.
Dr. Bhanumurthy, also, job creation is good. That's important. So do you see the increase in manufacturing jobs? That's important for us because the more we manufacture, in fact, the less we import, isn't it?
No, I don't see that kind of relationship.
Okay.
See, one needs to understand the large part of exports, manufacturing exports, are increasingly import-led. Okay.
Okay.
So I think that's what the point I said previously, that higher imports will actually reflect that there's going to be higher export demand in the economy.
Okay.
So I do feel that the November number will certainly suggest that going forward, we are going to see a better manufacturing exports. And the bottom line for any macro policy, Mark, as you rightly said, is that to create more job opportunities. And again, as you rightly pointed out in the beginning, that there are many indications that suggest that employment opportunities are actually increasing in the recent period. But we have right now, thanks to Ministry of Statistics, we do have high frequency data for the formal jobs that is being created. So that clearly indicates that while the economy is performing well, it also leading to better job opportunities in the country.
Dr. Bhanumurthy, also the dollar is gaining significantly. Is that something that the Indian economy should be worried about, since the Fed policy remains hawkish?
Well, I think that is going to be a big challenge, not only for India, but I think for many of the emerging market economies. So that looks like a clear risk for the overall global economy. I do hope that once the new administration come in, we will see a slightly better, global leadership from the United States, such a way that every country will grow together, rather than saying that the America first kind of a policy. So in terms of exchange rate, yes, we have already seen some pressures on the rupee, but thankfully we do have much better reserves, and I'm sure the Reserve Bank will take care of the excessive volatility in the exchange rate, particularly after the new administration takes up in the United States.
We leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. N.R. Bhanumurthy, Director of the Madras School of Economics. Thank you for joining us and enlightening us on the Indian economy's strong performance in 2024.
Thank you, Mark.
Let's move on to our next story then. Pakistan's central bank cut its key policy rate by 200 basis points to 13%. This happened on the 16th of December. Now, the central bank had targeted 5 to 7% inflation in the medium term, which it says is achievable in 12 months. Inflation, because of the high base year, came in at 4.9% in November in Pakistan. It's pretty good for Pakistan. But, Pakistan's economy is held back by social and political forces rather than a lack of enterprise. Let's look at this report.
Once the backbone of Karachi's economy, donkeys are now sidelined due to high upkeep costs and urban sprawl. For low-income workers, they once guaranteed financial stability. Meanwhile, modern Karachi sees women like Amina Sohail breaking norms, with more urban women entering the workforce due to financial pressures. Only 21% of women in Pakistan work, mainly in the informal sector and rural areas. In late November, Islamabad saw empty streets littered with smashed-up vehicles after Pakistan security forces arrested hundreds of supporters of the jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan. The movement for his release being led by his wife, Bushra Bibi, another sign of women rising up against the system.
I think an unusual situation where a woman who's in full burqa is going to be now in a leadership position, but she certainly now becomes a critical figure in what's transpiring.
The government faces significant challenges, balancing investment needs with loan dependencies, as the entrepreneurial class seeks to revive business activities. They are not in favor of Pakistan's debt program. Pakistan is navigating a tough economic recovery supported by a $7 billion IMF facility.
But that is not a solution. That is just becoming more and more in debt. The only way forward is enhancing Pakistan's exports and creating an environment that would be investor-friendly, business-friendly.
The textile sector, employing 25 million people and contributing about 8.5% to GDP, remains crucial despite energy shortages and political instability. On the structural reform front, the IMF had identified 44 entities for privatization, including power companies, with a target completion by 2025. The government had put in place a pipeline to achieve this.
But we are creating an entire pipeline. And the thought process is not all of that needs to be done or can be done during the next fiscal year.
On December 16, Pakistan's central bank cut its key policy rate by 200 basis points to 13%, marking the fifth reduction since June. Efforts to revive the economy continue, with inflation easing. In 2024, the central bank reduced rates by 900 basis points, surpassing the 625 basis points cut in 2020. The bank forecasts inflation to be substantially below the 2025 range of 11.5% to 13.5%, aiming for 5 to 7% inflation within 12 months. Risks include government revenue shortfalls, food inflation, and global commodity prices. The bank also received $500 million from the ADB for the Climate Change and Disaster Resilience Enhancement Program in November. The Economic Brief, DD India.
And Dr. Shalini Chawla, Distinguished Fellow at the Center for Air Power Studies, who tracks Pakistan closely from a security as well as an economy point of view, joins us. Dr. Chawla, very aggressive monetary policy one can see in Pakistan. It's like throwing caution to the winds. What's the country actually banking on? The IMF, China, or other creditors?
See, Mark, country has been banking on the external assistance for a very long time. And this external assistance has been a combination of the institution as well as the donors, which have been their traditional donors, I would say, like China, UAE, Saudi Arabia. And IMF has been very critical, has played a very critical role. And their reliance on IMF has been inevitable because of the unresolved balance of payment crisis. And till the time the balance of payment crisis they manage to resolve, which will not go away without the structural changes which IMF has recommended. And Pakistan is trying to kind of adhere to that. That's what we have been hearing. But those changes and conditionalities imposed by IMF, where Pakistan relies to large extent, are pretty strict. For example, 1.5 lakh jobs in Pakistan have been cut off because the cost had to be reduced, and that was one of the IMF conditionalities. IMF is bang on, but the point is that these conditionalities do play a role in terms of putting pressure on Pakistan, but Pakistan does not have a choice because the amount of debt which it has, which is close to about 74% of the GDP, is pretty high right now. And just to give you an example, the accumulated debt, between 2001 and 2023, the debt per capita in Pakistan has gone up by 36%. And if on the other side you see what has happened to the per capita income, that as a percentage of GDP in the same amount has decreased by 6%. So it will continue to rely on the external, assistance, and where all these, a combination of the financial institution and these 3 or 4 critical partners which he has will play a very critical role.
Also, Dr. Chawla, do you see the movement led by Bushra Bibi actually conveying the economic plight of the people over there? Because, in fact, will Pakistan continue to be hit by political instability?
The point is the movement that you're talking about, I'm presuming you're talking about the November 24th, the protest that happened in Chalk. See that those protests, I won't say that economy is the factor. It is certainly a contributing factor in the anger and, you agitate and the frustration within the people. The call for the protest was very different. It was about release of Imran Khan, reversal of the 26th Amendment. It was about also changing this whole regime. The cost of living going high, people having this economic crisis, high taxation will play a role in terms of the anger. But if you are asking me, was that the factor? I don't see it as a direct factor. Given your second question, whether Pakistan will see political stability, now see, we again have a hybrid regime, and we see under this regime, under Asim Munir, we see that military has been expanding its control and strengthening its control further, and the democratic, institutions are further weakening. With this kind of setup, I don't see political stability for a very long time, because every regime is dependent on the fact that it needs to remain in good books of the establishment, and it can only stay in power till it maintains that kind of symphony with the military. So these kind of the hybrid regime system, and with military trying to play a critical role in everything, including economy, political stability is a challenge.
But do you see, the rise in the number of working women taking their destinies into their own hands in a way as a good sign for Pakistan's overall wealth creation potential?
It's a good sign, and Pakistan has been wanting to do it. They actually also unveiled this roadmap Vision 2025, where they talked about the fact that they want to take the percentage of women labor force from 25% to 45% in 2025. It's a good sign, but then I think the overall economic growth, this cannot be a changing factor, a defining factor. The economic growth for the country needs basic changes in the fiscal policy, basic changes in the investment in the human capital, in the skill development, which has been a main factor for women not being able to work there, that apart from many other issues. So I think multiple other aspects are definitely required, but this, if you see it Independently, yes, it's a positive change. But is it a defining change? No.
Not yet. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Shalini Chawla, Distinguished Fellow at the Center for Air Power Studies. Thank you for enlightening us on the situation in Pakistan. Now, moving on to our next story, Bashar Assad's fall in Syria. It has allowed rebels, in fact, to unearth Syria's Captagon empire. Captagon is an addictive amphetamine-like stimulant with an annual trade worth billions of dollars. And Western governments have linked the illicit trade in Syria to Assad's brother, who's Maher al-Assad, and his whereabouts are unknown. Anu Kaushik looks at the scale of these operations.
After the rebels took control of Syria, they have been exposing factories which produce these white pills marked by a double crescent logo at an industrial scale. The pill is Captagon, a banned drug which funded the regime of deposed President Bashar al-Assad.
After we entered and did a sweep, we found that this is a factory for Maher al-Assad and his partner Amir Kiti. They work in Captagon and drugs. And we found a large number of devices that were stuffed with packages of Captagon pills meant to be smuggled out of the country.
Producing 80% of the world's total Captagon, Syria became a West Asian narcotic hub under Assad's rule. Developed by a German firm in the 1960s, Captagon was once used legally to treat attention deficit disorder and as a central nervous system stimulant. By 1986, most countries stopped using Captagon after the World Health Organization raised an alarm over its side effects, including depression, sleep deprivation, and loss of appetite. But by that time, Captagon had become popular as a recreational drug, especially in Gulf nations like Saudi Arabia and UAE. Earlier, it was armed groups and smugglers in Syria who engaged in the illicit trade of Captagon, which, being a synthetic drug, is easy to make. However, by 2011, when a civil war erupted in Syria, the Assad government became actively involved in the smuggling of Captagon.
We have good relations here with rebels and the guys from Damascus and Homs. They receive shipments from the 4th Division. They have an agreement with them. As the saying goes, if you put money in their hands, they will turn a blind eye.
The drug sales provided money to the Syrian government, whose finances were hit hard by Western sanctions over human rights violations. The business, in collaboration with armed group, was majorly led by Bashar al-Assad's brother Maher al-Assad. Annually, the Assad family is estimated to have profited around $2.4 billion from the drug trade. But across West Asia, Captagon became a menace, and countries were desperate to end its supply chains. This also gave Assad a bargaining power in the region. Syria's current government has promised to crack down on Captagon trade. While large factories might shut down, it will be challenging to contain small gangs involved in smuggling. Anu Kaushik's report for the Economic Brief, DD India.
Well, that's all we have on the Economic Brief, and we leave you with this story. The Democratic Republic of Congo has filed criminal complaints against the Apple subsidiaries in France and Belgium, accusing the tech giant of using conflict minerals in its supply chain. Lawyers for the Congolese government have alleged that Apple is complicit in the exploitation of minerals sourced from mines controlled by armed groups. Diptanshu Kashyap reports, and thank you very much for watching.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has filed criminal complaints against Apple subsidiaries in France and Belgium, accusing the tech giant of using conflict minerals in its supply chain. Lawyers representing the Congolese government argue that Apple is complicit in the exploitation of minerals from eastern Congo, which are controlled by armed groups. Extraction of these minerals is used to fund conflicts. These minerals, including tin, tantalum and tungsten, are essential for production of smartphones and computers, but the mines from which they are extracted are linked to serious human rights violations, including massacres, forced labor, and environmental devastation. Apple denies the allegations, saying that it does not directly source these minerals and that it audits its supply chain to ensure responsible sourcing. The company also claimed that it took action earlier this year to suspend sources from high-risk areas like the DRC and Rwanda due to escalating conflict. But international lawyers representing the DRC argued that Apple continues to benefit from minerals laundered through global supply chains, thereby perpetuating violence and supporting armed groups in the region. In an unrelated case in March, a US federal court rejected an attempt by private plaintiffs to hold Apple, Google, Tesla, Dell, and Microsoft accountable for their dependence on child labor in Congolese cobalt mines. The plaintiffs had accused these companies of benefiting from the exploitation of miners working in dangerous conditions. This case highlights the ongoing challenges for tech giants in addressing labor and human rights concerns within their supply chains, particularly in resource-rich conflict zones like the DRC. The new complaints filed in France and Belgium accuse Apple of covering up war crimes, laundering tainted minerals, and engaging in deceptive practices to assure consumers that their supply chains are clean. While the legal proceedings are still in early stages, they've sparked a broader debate about the accountability of major tech companies in the global effort to end the trade in conflict minerals. Diptanshu Kashyap's report for the Economic Brief, DD India.